This is the Norris Group's Real Estate Investor Radio Show, the award-winning show dedicated to thought leaders shaping the real estate industry and local experts revealing their insider tips to succeed in an ever-changing real estate market. Hosted by author, investor, and hard money lender, Bruce Norris.
The Norris Group proudly presents our 15th annual award-winning event, I Survived Real Estate. Industry experts join Bruce Norris to discuss evolving industry trends, real estate bubbles, inflation, and opportunities emerging for real estate professionals. All proceeds from the event benefit Make-A-Wish and St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. See isurvivedrealestate.com for event details, information on all our generous sponsors, and to connect with our speakers. We want to thank our platinum partners: San Diego Creative Investors Association, U-Direct IRA Services, White Feather Investments, The Collective Genius, MVT Productions, and Realty 411.
As all of you know, I love charts. I make decisions after looking at charts. And this was going to be a longer presentation, but I really decided not to do that because of the panelists that we have. I wanted to save most of the time for them. But I'm going to talk about some of this because this is an original creation of mine. It's called the moodometer. I don't know if I need this or not. Can you hear me without it? Yeah? Okay. Okay, a moodometer is an interesting invention. The affordability chart is something that I always paid attention to, but what I couldn't do is I couldn't play with it. It was just there, and I didn't know what I could do to improve what it told me. And so I started looking at this chart, and I realized that it played an important role. So this basically says that any given year, this is the percentage of your median income that you have to pay to real estate with a 20% down, okay? So this is the journey. Every once in a while, the peak hits, and that's typically euphoria. What's interesting about this chart is it doesn't chart capacity, it charts willingness. And willingness is the mood. So if it was just capacity and it was completely always 100%, all we'd have is gold lines. But we don't. But we know it's possible, but that's a peak. So how do you get to the peak? We just experienced it one. 2021, maybe the beginning of 2022. You had anything for sale? Wasn't it exciting? So we had a property that we had put up for sale, and we were going to ask, when we started the construction, $425. When we got done with the house, we thought it's $525. So that was a nice bonus, right, of $100,000 and a pretty good percentage. And then a bidding war ensued within 45 minutes. 11 cash offers and 1 VA offer. So this is what happens at the peak. So the peak, you get competitive bids, but maybe the finance one drives all the other cash buyers to another number. And that's exactly what happened. So the bidding continued. I gotta fix this. The bidding continued and got to $577. The winning bid was the VA that had the financing, but everyone that went along with that journey to $577 decided they wanted one too. And so we had 3 other houses under construction that was that house, and so they got it for $577 as well. That's crazy. Well, that's euphoria. It doesn't always happen. But isn't it interesting that we're always the most interested when it's at the peak? See, what I really like, this is a cheat sheet. So take a look at where it's at the bottom. That charts your mood. Your mood stinks. You hate real estate. Okay, instead of in the 60s, it's 28. And look at the year, 2008, 9. What did we have to do to get somebody to buy a house in 2009? That was already 60% off of the peak. We had to bribe them with $8,000. Please buy one of these. See, that's why I like this chart. It doesn't take a genius. I think I'll buy when it's at its low, when everyone else hates it. And I think you can have it when it approaches 60. How's that? Now, what it also does is tell you that if something changes in the formula, and by the way, has the mood changed now? Okay. So that means you're really not at 60 now. We're not sure where we are. So what we're going to do here is we're going to plug in some numbers to see if the mood changes, what happens to the median price that's possible. So when you get into like 850 grand and you're at 60% mood, and your interest rate changes and your mood changes at the same time, you may end up with a very different median. I'm going to go backwards, if I'm allowed to do that. One of the things that you can also take a look at is, this is a span of 42 years. You visited over 60% 5 times. That's it. So 12% of the time. You're only over 50, maybe 20% of the time, where you normally are. And it's sort of like if you're in a decent mood toward real estate, you're at 45. An average, you're at 40. And you're not happy, you're at 35. And if you hate real estate, you're below 30. So think about that. Wherever you are in the mood, see, that's going to dictate perhaps what somebody's going to be willing to buy the next house for. So let's take a look at what interest rates do to this. And it's one of the things that you can chart. So a 45% mood reading is a pretty decent reading. It's not euphoric, it's not completely giddy, but it's okay. As a matter of fact, it's more likely the 40 and the 45 category really is the dominant specter of where you end up. So if you have a 5% interest rate, but you're in a mood of 45% instead of 60, your median price goes down to 650 grand. Just because your mood changed. And if you have a 7% interest, what happens to it? It goes to 520. So we got to almost 900 grand in California. Complete euphoria, all the double bids. Well, this is a math formula that's saying you're at 7%, and if you go back to historically where you are most of the time, your median price is not going to survive at 800 or 700. It's going to get to it's going to get below 600. What if your mood is worse? What if it's 40? Now your median price at 7% is 465. And what if it's 35? You really, really don't like real estate. Now it's 410. So what this is basically saying, if it's just a math function, you've got a 35 to 50% price hit that's locked and loaded. Aren't you glad you came tonight? But it's really interesting that it may not happen. And so that's what we're going to look at. Are there mitigating factors in place that may make that not happen? First of all, you've got in place the most amazing set of interest rates on existing mortgages, right? And thank you for John Burns provided this chart as he did when I did my seminar a few months ago. He was very generous and allowed us to use some of these charts. So look at the interest rate. Below 3%, 13% of the group that had loans. 3 to 3.9 is 38. 4 to 4.9 is 30. That's a big percentage. That's 80% of the mortgage is not 7, not 6, under 5. So what's going to induce them to put their house up for sale? Okay, yeah, there could be motivation, but are you going to see the majority of that inventory show up for sale? Or you could see them going, you know what, I'm good. What if it actually got upside down and you had a 2 or 3% mortgage on it? Would it possibly cash flow as a rental? So the reason we put the title on that report that I just wrote, Uncharted Territory, is we've never had these set of charts, ever. We've never enjoyed an in-place interest rate of 2 or 3%. And so what's going to be interesting is to see if this prevents price damage, because the math is locked and loaded. Your mood is going to come down, and you should take a price hit, but what if your demand, and I think sales are going to go down maybe by half. But what if that's all the inventory that shows up? What if the demand is met with supply that's pretty meager? Also, you know what's going to go up is cash sales. Whatever percentage they are, they're probably going to double. So you're really talking about maybe a small part of the market. It doesn't mean you're going to make a good living as a realtor, because you're going to have maybe half the sales, but it could prevent price damage, okay? For a long time now, we haven't used adjustable mortgages because we haven't needed to. So there's no time bombs waiting in the wings that are going to adjust tomorrow. If you get a 5-1 arm or something like that now, that's 5 years away from an adjustment. So that's a safe pile of loans we've got. Most of them are fixed. And we have huge equity positions. So somebody loses their job, there's a very good chance they're selling that property for a profit, and they can move on, okay? Something I thought of, because I happen to live in Florida, is that let's say you have a home in New York. We get a lot of migration from New York. So if you owe 50% on a home in New York, and it's at 3%, but you decide you want to move to Florida, can you sell that home in New York and buy Florida house for cash? No problem. You've just solved your problem. I don't need that loan back. I'm going to a place where the real estate's half, and I'll buy there. Which is why I like being in Florida, because it attracts migration. And I think that's probably going to continue. This is equity cashed out. So we got a little aggressive in 2021, but nothing compared to where we were in the last cycle. Every once in a while, I kind of talk to my tax preparer, because she's got bird's eye view on people's habits constantly. And during that cycle, in 2003 and 4 and 5, people were just refining their house every year, maybe twice, pulling money out, having fun, buying toys. That did not happen this time. New home construction, this is a national chart. So after we went crazy with building all the homes, there was a big gap. And why was that? Well, they were below replacement cost. The prices crashed so much you couldn't pencil a new house. So you had a big hole, and then it gradually built back up. So what typically happens at the end of a price cycle where prices go down, builders usually are building crazy amounts of houses, and they can end up getting to an auction. And we'll look in a minute at the California chart. So this is the existing inventory for sale. If you go back to the worst time where big price hits happened, we had almost 4 million houses for sale. And now we have less than about a million. So there's not a lot of inventory for sale. And so it depends, I guess, on the demand. If the demand is kind of equal to that supply, we may get through this fairly unscathed. This is job demand, and I know that's down some, maybe by a million or so, but 12 million jobs. This is showing, I think it's down to 11 or below. And this is the amount of unemployed persons per job opening. So you got 2 job openings for every person looking. That's unusual. Okay, that's very supportive of price. So unemployment, really very healthy. And so it'll be really interesting to see as they try to raise rates and see if we end up having a recession, if that changes. So this is California construction, new homes. And this is really interesting to me. So typically what happens is builders, that's why they need John Burns so much, because they're the worst timing experts ever. Because so late in the cycle, they have such unusual demand, right? So that just it happened in Rosamond. When we built 93 houses, we gradually built momentum to the end of, say, 2005, where people were camping out in Rosamond to buy a new house. Do you know where Rosamond is? It's in the middle of nowhere. After Rosamond, there's nothing. And so people were lined up, and we had fist fights to get to buy a house in Rosamond. And so 5 of them sold for about $280 in the last phase, and 2 of them fell out. And then the market changed. The mood changed. The capacity didn't, but they didn't want it anymore. And you know what those homes sold for? $205. So what happened to the guy who just bought it for $280 and put $75,000 down? Maybe I walk away. Anybody know who Tony Alvarez is? Yeah, Tony Alvarez bought those homes in that tract for $40,000 or less 3 years later. Guess the mood wasn't so good, huh? So that's why I like understanding. But so what's going to happen now? We didn't build 150,000 houses like we have every other peak cycle. We built 60. There's not going to be a bunch of auctions in California that say, okay, wow, we're going to sell that for a discount, and if you just bought one, you're going to lose out. That ain't going to happen. So that's interesting that this is not a big participant. So think about the inventory that's not going to show up. You got literally 100,000 new homes that were never built, and you've got a bunch of people with 2% and 3% mortgages that say, I'm good, I'll just stay. California trustee sales, so we're going to have Sean on the panel and talk about trustee sales. And one of the things the news media can do is, they got to create excitement. So what would happen if you said now trustee sales have doubled? Wouldn't that be terrible? Like you can barely, we didn't even get to 2022, but there's so few trustee sales that if it doubles, it's nothing. So you can just look at this chart and go, okay, that's not going to make a significant impact unless it gets crazy. Well, that requires lenders thinking that's a good idea to foreclose on stuff. And last time they didn't do too well. So this is what happened when the lenders decided to foreclose on all the stuff they could. If you were involved in that market at the time, I can tell you what happened in Moreno Valley. And let's see if I have that chart that I want. Nope. Okay. So in California, 7 of 10 sales was a REO. And what happened when we're talking in a neighborhood that was 365,000 at the peak in 2005 and 6. These REOs started to get listed at 85 or 285, and then they never sold. Finally, these lenders, by the way, they were getting fined $1,000 a day because their home had broken window or it had a lawn that wasn't good, and they just said, forget it, we're out of here for $65,000. Okay, 20 cents on the dollar. Trouble is, most of the sales were that. So I buy one, put 20 grand in to fix it. I have 25 offers at 125 to take it off my hands, and the appraisal comes in at 95. Because 7 of the 10 comps are 65 grand, and it dominated the market. And it literally froze the market below replacement costs. You couldn't get a permit and a building lot for that, but that was the real estate value. So that's what the lenders experienced. Do you think they're going to do that again? Intentionally? I don't think so. I think they may work out something if they're going to foreclose on a bunch of people, but I'm not sure they're going to even have that opportunity because, again, low interest rate loans in place, manageable payment, probably just say, you know what, I'm good. And another thing that's really kind of helpful, how many of you guys have experienced rent increases for what you own? Okay, well, rent increases all of a sudden start supporting a price and an interest rate that it never did before. So I think we have that here. So our affordability number is repetitive. When it gets to the bottom, it gets 17% or so. This is significant, and what happened here was different than before. So we're now in 2022, we're at 16% affordability. How long did it take to get to 16% affordability in 2022 versus 2021?
Months.
Took 3 months. How many people were buried in an affordability number that's terrible? Almost nobody. Well, what happened in 2005, 6, and 7 was very different. You had those boom years where, oh my gosh, we're doing 500,000 plus transactions, and we're lending people that shouldn't own a property because they don't even have to fill out an application really or have a job. We buried 1.5 million purchasers at the lowest affordability number. And this time we buried almost nobody. So that's what I'm trying to say is that math formula that Moodometer is saying, you're going to have a big price hit if things were normal. But all of these things are mitigating factors that may in fact prevent that. So, what's the outcome? That's why I'm glad we have the panel of smart people to say, what do you think? Okay? So that was what we just said there. This is kind of a Florida case study, and I did this at a 5.7% interest rate. Now it's probably 7. Can you get in a 5-1 ARM at 5.7? Probably. Okay, so it still holds true. So this is a Florida house with a pool on the left, and this is one that Craig Evans builds for us. Basically, house price worth $400,000. If you put 20% down, let's say you wanted to live in it, you got a balance of $320,000. Your PI payment is $1,857, and so forth, goes to $2,457, and the rental value is $2,400. So what I like about this is, okay, my payment's $2,457, but I also get principal pay down to $337, and I'm renting and throwing away $2,400. If that was my scenario, would I be a buyer or a renter? It might make all the sense in the world to be a buyer. It doesn't matter that it's worse than it was before. It means I'm going to write a $2,400 rent check, or I'm going to write a $2,400 payment check and get credit for it every month. You could see where people would still make that decision. The more expensive home has got a pool, down payment 20%, and that rents for $3,900, and the payments after the principal pay down $3,965. So even with the interest rate hikes, some of these things can make sense to own. So how does this play out going forward? I mean, that's what we're here tonight, is to ask some of the people their opinion, because I'm not absolutely sure, but I know the math is scary, but I know what might prevent the math from actually being enacted could actually win the day. So it'll be very interesting. All right, what time do we have? 8:10, 8:11, and we're supposed to go to 8:30. All right, well, let's do this. I'm going to have Craig Evans come up. Craig is the builder that's building our rental homes for us in Florida. He's done a great job, and it's probably been the toughest 2 years you could build anything, just because of all the things that have occurred in the meantime. Have a seat wherever you wish. Boy, you look a lot better than I've seen you before. Craig Evans is a third-generation contractor and has been involved in many facets of construction. Through his family background, he started at the bottom and worked his way up, learning all aspects of the job from labor to management. Craig has had major roles in residential, commercial, municipal. I can't even say the word, in agricultural construction. Through the years, Craig has developed an ability to grow and scale businesses, is now setting Douglas Brooks Homes in building in Florida, Georgia, and expanding to Tennessee, first quarter 2022. He believes in teamwork as well as having valued and trusted trade partners. Craig has put together a quality team in-house as well as some of the most trusted trade partners in the industry to build Douglas Brooks Homes. When I met Craig, it was kind of crazy circumstances. We had a builder that had sort of disappeared with a couple $1 million, and I was writing checks to settle with the subcontractors, and half the ones I was paying, I'm sorry, I don't want to, can I move this? I don't want to mess it up. I'm going to stand, sorry about that. Okay, as I was paying the people that were taking a discount so they could get paid something instead of what the general contractor had done, as I'm paying the subs, they're going, why don't you just use Craig Evans, man? He's paid us great for 10 years, and so, okay, maybe I should do that. And he got a call too, and so we met, and we've hit it off. And so He's probably been in the ground and above the ground with 100 houses right now, and we're constantly dreaming up the next thing to do. So thank you for helping bail us out, and then now we're on to some good things. So one of the things that just happened is a hurricane in Florida. How many of you own anything in Florida? Okay, so there's a lot of our clients that own stuff in Florida. And this is the text somewhere in the mid-morning, like 2 in the morning. Winds 140 miles an hour sustained, 178 mile an hour gusts at your house.
So we ended up at 162 mile an hour sustained
Oh.
was the final, and the final gusts were at 198 miles an hour for over 3 hours.
Is that a category 7.5 or what? I thought 155 was like a 5 or a 5.
Cat 5, yeah.
Yeah, that's it, right? Holy cow. Okay. You've been in Florida a long time. Can you compare this hurricane with the others?
So many of you that have followed Florida, you know, there was a big hurricane in 2005, Hurricane Charlie. Did a lot of damage on the West Coast. Some of you may have seen the stat. The entire storm of Charlie fit inside the eye of Hurricane Ian. You know, it was expected to make landfall at a Category 1. That's an afternoon Thursday storm for us. We go play in the backyard, you know. Just tell the kids don't cross the street. But you know, it ended up staying, and it greatly slowed down. So what should have, with Charlie, was a matter of a few hours. This storm literally lasted for 11 hours of just torrential beatings. What areas were particularly hard hit? So the coastal areas, it literally turned and came straight in over top of us on Sanibel Island, Fort Myers Beach. They had about 21 feet of storm surge that came through. So most of those houses they're not there anymore. You know, we on one of my companies, we do a lot of commercial building as well, and we've got a big remodel on a hotel there, and the bottom 3 floors just aren't there. Their walls are missing. There's a lot of structural integrity gone. It's an interesting time. What was the typical age of the properties that were there in that area? Most of the stuff on Fort Myers Beach, I mean, there's the new stuff stood well. Right. The new stuff stood well. But you've got a lot of houses on Fort Myers Beach that are built as far back as the 50s. So there's a lot of things that were built 2 feet above flood level. And so, you know, at that point, their roof is 12 feet underwater. So that was, you know, people talk about that 100-year storm. I was talking with a gentleman earlier that this was really the 500-year storm for our state. Wow. So I'm just curious, since that's structurally different, so no one's going to be able to build the same house there? No. Everything has to be brought up to code, to floodplains, and that whole process. Okay. What's the time frame to let's say, I still want to keep my lot, but I want to build a new house? When's the new house going to be done? So pre-storm, we were at about, to get through permitting and entitlements, we were roughly 7 months just to get through permitting is an average. And then depending on the builder and their efficiencies, it could be anywhere from 5 months to 20 months to physically build the house. So. Okay, so in your opinion, the flood was more damaging than the wind, even though the wind was crazy? Absolutely. Most of especially like the homes that we built, you know, you go through that and you don't know what to expect. I mean, I was raised on structure. You know, my grandfather built 50-story buildings in Chicago, and so I'm raised to know how to build stuff that lasts till Jesus comes back. You know, but you come out and you're like, man, we don't know what's going to happen here. So we go out, and all of our homes, except one that we had just laid block on, hadn't poured the beam through, so structure, it wasn't there yet. Everything else, we lost a few shingles, lost a piece of gutter, just very minor stuff. The majority of the damage was primarily all storm surge, unless it was an older home. What number of homes are we talking about in Lee County that got taken out? So as of this morning, we're still in the initial damage phase right now of trying to assess what's going on. As of this morning, there's about 56,000 homes in Lee County, that's single-family residences, that have had anywhere from complete destruction to, they have complete destruction, major damage, minor damage, and then affected, which they're affected is basically classified as you had some roof that you need to have shingles put on or tiles or things like that. Their minor damage, surprisingly, is actually still classified as 2 feet of water or less inside the home is considered minor damage. So,
if you own an insurance company, that's your description of. That's minor.
So we've got a little over about 22% of SFRs have been tragically affected in Lee County.
And okay, the number that you just gave me, how many new homes are constructed in that county?
2021, as you've seen the charts from Bruce, 2021 we had a fantastic year, and of all the residential permits pulled that were either new construction or major renovations, not going to put a new roof on or replacing an AC, there was only 8,000 permits pulled. So at the rate of construction, we've got somewhere between 7 and 8 years if we don't do anything else other than repair homes.
When people go through a hurricane like that, what percentage of them say, I'm out of Florida, I'm going somewhere else?
You really don't get a ton of people that want to just pack up and leave.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to put a number on it. I'd just be pulling it out of a backside there. But the reality is you don't get a lot of people. It is a little interesting this time. We're starting to see some of the people that are in their 70s and 80s, and they're like, because of FEMA's new rule of 50%, you anything that has 50% more of damage according to an assessed value, then it has to be brought up to code. Well, so for the people that are in their 70s or 80s, we're starting to find some of them are just saying, it's not worth it. Now, the difference, which you and I spoke about a little bit this morning, is we're seeing some of the people that are on more of a limited fixed income, they just physically can't afford to rebuild. So that's a little bit of a different scenario depending on insurance. What we're seeing is a week before the storm, the luxury RV market was tanking. 4 days after the storm, they had already sold 127 $500,000 to $1.5 million RVs to sit in their driveway while they wait 2.5 years to have their house rebuilt.
Now, what's the reason? So Hurricane Andrew was in '92. That was my experience with hurricanes. Mm-hmm. So, how long would it take for people like from the city to go look at these damaged homes and say it's red tagged or whatever? Do they even have the capacity, or are they using everybody that's breathing to do that job?
That's part of the process, and again, because it's changed since Andrew, FEMA has the 50% rule now. So it's not only is it going to be demolished or things like that, it has to pass a 50% rule to see if they can even allow you to pull a permit. So you've got that problem along with insurance that only has 90 days to come up with an evaluation. They're literally bringing adjusters in from all over the state. They're having people call to do a video assessment of your house because they physically can't get everywhere fast enough.
Okay, so the system gets completely overloaded.
Correct.
And that's big mistakes are made at that point.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of and just this week they've come out with some new topics or new guidelines for what they're going to allow to pass as emergency permitting. But even a couple of municipalities will give you emergency permitting over the counter, but some of them are still a week to a week and a half out. The whole time that clock's ticking for them to make decisions with insurance and everything else that has to happen. And
is there a special permit process for damaged homes versus the months and months of the other?
Again, just finalized this week as far as basically, what is that going to look like? What's the determination of how much damage it received? If it's classifying into a minor, and they've done a pretty good job of outlining what that is now, so it's going to take a lot of the guesswork out of it. But, that will speed that up. But once you start getting near that number, at that point, you have to have people come out and physically assess the location, which is going to create a massive logjam.
So let me just paint you a picture as I see it, as it playing out, which is why I'm really glad I'm in Florida. Would you say you have a lot more demand than supplier at this point? Okay, for rent and for purchases.
For rent and purchase, we physically, we still can't build fast enough. And you know, where I had the great privilege to sit with some gentlemen this evening that are, you know, I said, I don't know why you've got me here. They got more degrees than a thermometer, so, you know, I'm not sure why I'm here. But the bottom line is, you know, being able to talk through one of the things that I'm seeing about our specific market, and this was even pre-storm, is the amount of in-state migration that was, or I guess out-of-state migration coming in. You know, up until just a few months ago, we were still having 975 people a day moving to the state of Florida. Almost 60% of those people were coming to Southwest Florida. There's tons of land already entitled, that type of process. Just getting it done, you know. And once the interest rates started to tick up, okay, we started pricing out some of our market share from an affordability factor, but there was still enough cash buyers coming in from out of the state or that could afford to take a leverage point. But the reality is now that there's nobody's wanting to sell their product from a resale. From a building perspective, it's a good time to be a builder in Florida.
Well, it's also going to have migration of a lot of people that do work. So you're going to have tons of people migrating there that are probably going to figure out in a couple of years, I think I'll stay here.
Well, you know, and that's the interesting thing. As you and I were talking a little bit this morning, again, if we just take it last year in 2021, there was already a short supply of labor to get houses built in a timely you know, aspect. When Bruce and I first met, we were building houses in 63 days. Because of supply chains and because of labor shortages and that type of process, we had hit a point till we were at about 10 months, and now we're back down to about 5. Whereas for the rest of the market, it's still a pretty long build cycle. But in that process, there was still, I could have hired 100 people and still not kept up with demand. Now you add on 56,000 more houses, and they're still estimating there's about 30,000 houses they haven't been able to review. So that number is only going to go up. When you take all of that in that has to be done, how's it going to be? How are these things physically going to get done? Well, we've got to bring in people from out of state. And so there's interesting things. Where are they going to live during this process? Because there's already, we just took 20% of the market share of houses out of the market. So what's that going to do to the price relevance of our market, the affordability of our market, and the need for housing in our market?
Yeah, it's going to be a very different experience, I think, in that part of Florida than it would be maybe in California. Even though the interest rates are going up, I think the demand. I'm going to mention one other thing about Craig. So we have a lot going on. I don't know how many houses we have, but 80 or something like that. Right. So this is a day or two after the hurricane. He said, I basically need to just pull away from construction right now, and he's got a boat. And so he's texting me, he says, Coast Guard called me yesterday afternoon, I ran another 120 people off of Pine Island, 6 or 7 at a time. So this guy's making 20 trips until it's completely dark, getting people off of an island so they can have something to eat after days. So that's why I like working this stuff. And I said, do I need to bring anything? And he sent me the longest list I've ever seen in my life. So my wife and I went to Costco and loaded up the back. It was great. He said, one thing they need, man, the kids, they have no kids' clothes. Right. They have nothing, so all the kids have no clothes. So we went to Costco and just took big scoops off of and it was cool. Yeah, it was cool. All right.
We'd also like to thank our gold sponsors: Chase Leland Photography, Inland Valley Association of Realtors, Keystone CPA Inc., LA South RIA, Lavis Tax Wealth Management, NorCal RIA, NSD REI, Pasadena Phoebe, Tony Alvarez, White House Catering, Wilson Investments, Windermere Tower Realty. See iSurvivedRealEstate.com for event details, information on all our generous supporters, and to connect with our speakers.
For more information on hard money loans and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For information on passive investing with trust deeds, visit tngtrustdeeds.com.
The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under California DRE License 012-19911, Florida Mortgage Lender License 1577, and NMLS License 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the Hard Money tab.